Mantras of our Lord Sri Aurobindo. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, broadly, the sadhana consists of a progressive surrender of oneself inward and based upon it the outward also to the Guru, to the Divine. Meditation, concentration, work, service, all these are means for a self-gathering in all one's moments with the sole aim of delivering oneself into the hands of a higher power for being worked on and led towards the goal. The mother guides, helps each according to his nature and need, and wherever necessary, herself intervenes with her power, enabling the sadhak to withstand the rigorous demands of the path. She has placed herself with all the love, peace, knowledge and consciousness that she is at the disposal of every aspiring soul that looks for help. The divine grace and power can do everything, but with the full assent of the sadhak, to learn to give that full assent is the whole meaning of the sadhana, says our Lord Sri Aurobindo. Words of our Divine Mother from the book Sunlit Path, page 71, topic The Divine Work, subtopic The Three Victories. Our Divine Mother says the first victory is to create an individuality, and then later the second victory is to give this individuality to the divine, and the third victory is that the divine changes your individuality into a divine being. There are three stages. The first is to become an individual. The second is to consecrate the individual that he may surrender entirely to the divine and be identified with him. And the third is that the divine takes possession of this individual and changes him into a being in his own image, that is, he too becomes divine. Generally, all the yogas stopped at the second, when one had succeeded in surrendering the individual and giving him without reserve to the divine to be identified with him. One considered that his work was finished and that all was accomplished. But we begin there and we say, no, this is only a beginning. We want this divine with whom we are identified to enter our individuality and make it into a divine personality acting in a divine world. And this is what we call transformation. But the other precedes it. It must precede it. If that is not done, there is no possibility of doing the third. One can't go from the first to the third. One must pass through the second, says our Divine Mother. Next topic, contacting that. Our Divine Mother says there is something, there is a reality which is beyond all our expressions, but which we can succeed in contacting by practicing a discipline. We can identify ourselves with it. Once one is identified with it, one knows what it is, but one cannot express it, for words cannot say it. So, if you use one kind of vocabulary, if you have a particular mental conviction, you will use the vocabulary corresponding to that conviction. If you belong to another group which has another way of speaking, you will call it or even think about it in that way. I am telling you this to give you the true impression that there is something there which cannot be grasped by thought, but which exists. But the name you give it matters little. That's of no importance. It exists. And so the only thing to do is to enter into contact with it, not to give it a name or describe it. In fact, there is hardly any use giving it a name or describing it. One must try to enter into contact, to concentrate upon it, to live it, live that reality. And whatever the name you give it is not at all important once you have the experience. The experience alone counts. And when people associate the experience with a particular expression and in so narrow a way, so closed up in itself, that apart from this formula one can find nothing, that is inferiority. One must be able to live that reality through all possible paths, all occasions, all formations. One must live it, for that indeed is true. For that is supremely good, that is all powerful, that knows all that. Yes, one can live that. But one cannot speak that knows all that. Yes, one can live that, but cannot speak. And if one does speak, all that one says has no great importance. It's only a way of speaking it. That's all. There is an entire line of philosophies and people who have replaced the notion of God by the notion of an impersonal absolute, or by a notion of truth, or a notion of justice, or even by a notion of progress, of something eternally progressive. But for one who has within him the capacity of identifying himself with that, what has been said about it hasn't much importance. Sometimes one may read a whole book of philosophy and not progress a step farther. Sometimes one may be quite a fervent devotee of a religion and not progress. There are people who have spent entire lifetime seated in contemplation and attained nothing. There are people who used to do the modest of the manual works like a cobbler mending old shoes who had an experience. It's altogether beyond what one thinks and says of. It is some gift that's there, that's all. And all that is needed is to be that, to succeed in identifying oneself with it and live it. At times you read one sentence in a book and that leads you there. Sometimes you read entire book of philosophy or religion, then you get that gets you nowhere. There are people, however, the reading of philosophy helps to go ahead, but all these things are secondary. There is only one thing that's important, that is a sincere and persistent will. For these things doesn't happen in a twinkling, so one must persevere. When one feels that he is not advancing, he must not get discouraged. He must try to find out what is in the nature that is opposing and then make the necessary progress. And suddenly, one goes forward, and when you reach the end, you have an experience. And what is remarkable is that people who have followed altogether different paths with altogether different mental constructions, from the greatest believer to the most unbelieving, even materialistics, have arrived at that experience. It is the same for everyone, because it is true, because it is real, because it is the sole reality. And it is quite simply that I do not say anything more. This is of no importance, the way one speaks about it. What is important is to follow the path, your path, no matter which. Yes, to go there. Birth into the spirit. In the individual existence, the spirit is what makes all the difference. So long as one just speaks of the spirit, it is something one has read about, whose existence one vaguely knows about, but not a very concrete reality for the consciousness. This means that one is not born into the spirit. And when one is born into the spirit, it becomes something much more concrete, much more living, much more real, much more tangible than the whole material world. And this is what makes the essential difference between things. When that becomes spontaneously real, the true concrete existence, the atmosphere one can freely breathe, then one knows one has crossed over to the other side. But as long as it is rather vague and hazy, you have heard about it, you know it exists, but it has no concentrate reality. Well, this means that the new birth has not yet taken place. Next subtopic, the temple within you. A divine mother says, in the depths of your consciousness is the psychic being, the temple of the divine within you. This is the center round which should come about the unification of all these divergent parts, all these contradictory moments of your being. Once you have got the consciousness of the psychic being and its aspirations, these doubts and difficulties can be destroyed. It takes more or less time, but will surely succeed in the end. Once you have turned into the divine, saying, I want to be yours, and the divine has said yes, the whole world cannot keep you from it. Once you have turned to the divine, saying, I want to be yours, and the divine has said yes, the whole world cannot keep you away from it. When the central being has made its surrender, the chief difficulty has disappeared. The outer being is like a crust. In ordinary people, the crust is so hard and thick that they are not conscious of the divine within them. If once, even for a moment only, the inner being has said, I am here and I am yours, then it is as though a bridge has been built, and little by little the crust becomes thinner and thinner until the two parts are wholly joined, and the inner and the outer becomes one. Our Divine Mother says, the generator is the divine, the lamp is the body. It is the visible thing. So that's the function of the body. This means that if there was no psychic in matter, it would not be able to have different contact with the divine. It wouldn't have that direct contact with the divine. And it is happily due to the psychic presence in matter that the contact between the matter and the divine can be direct, and all human beings can be told, you carry the divine within you, and you have only to enter within yourself and you will find him. These are the golden words of our Divine Mother.